Hi, welcome. There are some amendments to the BVI Business Companies Act coming up. Some of these go into force on the 1st of January 2023, and we think some of them are significant, so we're going to run down the top ones here. First of all, we've got striking off and dissolution of companies, then the process in how to restore those dissolved companies. There's some changes in the availability of director names. Financial records and accounts is quite an important one. This is, I think, significant and will change the processes in a number of our clients. There's some administration changes to liquidations, and there's some changes in the law with respect to the register of persons with significant control. Not bringing that in yet, but bringing in the ability to bring it in. This is all going to happen from the 1st of January 2023, and as I said, some of these we feel are quite significant. So first of all, historically, when people haven't paid their annual fees in BVI, the register has kind of put these in limbo, and they've struck it off, but it hasn't been dissolved, so the company hasn't disappeared as such. And generally, there's been about a 7-year period whereby the directors, shareholders, etc., can bring it back to good standing by paying those fees and any penalties put in place. We've seen historically advice being, if you don't need the company, don't pay the fees, and then you've got this 7-year limbo period where if you change your mind, you can bring it back as such. Well, going forwards, that's going to change. The register has a number of reasons that they can strike a company off, but specifically for failure to pay annual fees. That fee's not paid, then the register can apply to just dissolve the company immediately going forwards. That will mean there will be no chance of just paying the fee a little bit late and bringing it back. The process for bringing back a dissolved company is more significant than just paying the outstanding fees. There are going to be some transitional arrangements, but our advice is not to bank on those on being particularly generous. And if you do have companies that are in this limbo period, you should decide now whether you want to get rid of them or you do want them back or may want them back. So currently, in order to restore a dissolved company, you actually have to go through a court order, which is an expensive process. Going forwards, there should be a simpler method, which is an application to the registrar. But there will be some complications on that. So for example, a licensed person will need to consent to take on the role of registered agent, and they will have to declare that they've got various up-to-date information. We see this as quite a cleaning house exercise for BVI and making sure that the registered agents have what they need in place and there's no kind of legacy there in the closet as such. It's further complicated if there was any property involved. So if you had a holding company that owned some shares, you didn't pay the annual fee, it was then dissolved. Those annual shares technically, those shares that are owned by the holding company, technically vest to the Crown. So if there's any property involved, you're really going to need to talk to lawyers. This is no longer an administrative process. Directors' names, currently they're very private. Going forwards, registered users of the BVI corporate records system version will be able to see them. Interesting to note that people won't be able to search by director name. They'll only be searched by company name. So the risk of someone finding out this director is a director of 1,000 companies is not as easy as just one quick search. They'd have to search every single company name. And also note, it's not the full register of directors, so the details on that will be relatively limited. So there's still an element of privacy, but obviously not as private as it is currently. Now, this is quite a big one. Historically, I've seen that where people have BVIs, they don't keep financial records. They keep very simple financial records that are probably not up to date. And that's been fine. BVI hasn't required audits, no shape or form of financial filing, etc., etc. So that has probably been okay for the owners of the business as such. But going forwards, so again, this is from 1st of January 2023, there's going to be required to be an annual return, which will have financial information, and that will need to be submitted to the registered agent. Now, the intention is not for that information to go any further. It's not going to go to the BVI government, it's not going to be made public, etc. But the registered agent will have to say if there's any non-compliance, and they need to receive that information within 9 months of the end of the financial year. Now, the financial year in BVI is selected by the company. So it's not the calendar year. That's a big thing to take note of. So it's 9 months, and then the registered agent will inform of non-compliance 30 days after that. It's not expected to be audited. It's expected to just be a simple balance sheet and profit and loss, but it's still something that will need to be done. So there may be an element of catch-up accounting that needs to be resolved before the end of this year, just to get on top of things. Liquidations, very administrative here. There's now a residence requirement for the liquidator, and that is to have been resident in BVI for 180 days continuously or in aggregate prior to appointment. We don't think this is going to affect many people, but if you have a large number of BVIs, you churn through them, and you've closed these as a voluntary liquidator before, this may affect you because you'll need to use someone at BVI. One good thing is the joint liquidations, liquidators are allowed, and the other party in that can be non-resident. So if you have a complicated liquidation, perhaps with assets or property in a foreign country, but time zones and similar, the other liquidator could be resident in another country other than BVI. Now, a number of jurisdictions now have some shape or form of significant control register. So here in Hong Kong we have one, and it simply lists out who is behind the shareholders and directors, who controls the company either through control agreements or employment or similar. The ability to have that has now been put into the BVI legal framework. There is no requirement for it as yet, but it's expected that will happen at some point in the future. So next steps. Well, first of all, if you have BVIs, you should probably do an inventory of them and make sure that you've paid your annual fees and they're paid on time every time. You should probably check any old companies you have. Maybe you set up a BVI 10 years ago to do some investments. Well, you should check on it and see, is it in good standing? Do you need to do anything to bring it up to good standing? You should consider the disclosure of directors' names. Are you happy for your name to be out there with this company? Or perhaps you're the director of a friend's company because they needed a director. Well, is that still appropriate if your name's going to be out there? You should ensure that the accounts have been prepared. So even for something like a holding company, you still will need to prepare those accounts because you will have to do some form of submission to the registered agent. As part of that, you probably want to make sure you know what your year end is, so you can timetable that and work it out. Liquidator changes, I think it's only significant if you do a lot of liquidations. Maybe a fund structured through BVI with lots of BVI holding companies where maybe you were going to do those liquidations in-house. Well, you'll need to do that externally now. And then ensure you've got the data on significant control. So if you're a service provider, or your use service providers, they may be asking questions around who is behind these shares, etc. So anticipate those questions to be coming forwards. As always, please feel free to give us a shout if you've got any questions or if we can help you in any way. Thank you.